Stannis sat in his chair and contemplated his options. Just outside of his encampment was Renly's army, his brother, who foolishly now attempted to usurp the throne from him. Stannis knew what needed to be done. His army needed Renly's and the Reach to take King's Landing. The bloody Tyrells marching for his brother. He should have them all hanged for treason. But Stannis knew his anger was getting the best of him. If he were to act brash, he could do something that would make him regret it for the rest of his life. He looked down at the peach his brother tossed him. He had no love for Robert, but there was something for Renly. Melisandre would then enter the room and ask him what he wishes to do about Renly, promising that if he were to let her act on her own, then he would have his army in the morning. She would then claim that he is Azor Ahai, the promised prince to save them from the long night and unite the realm. She would then try to coax him to sleep with her, yet Stannis would see the peach once more on the table. Stannis would feel the temptation, but would tell her that when he has need of her in his bed, he will call upon her. It was as if he had passed some sort of test, he felt. Stannis would leave to go speak to Davos. Davos would remind Stannis that it was him who held out against the Tyrells and the siege of Storm's End. It was him who defeated the Greyjoy fleet during their rebellion, and he who took Dragonstone. Stannis did all those things, not the Lord of Light. If anyone can unite the realm, it was him. Morning came, and Stannis, with a small contingent of lords, including Davos and Melisandre, would approach Renly in front of his army. Stannis would see Catelyn Stark still amongst them. Renly would ask if Stannis had come to surrender, or does he still seek war? Stannis, instead, will call out all of the lords within sight.
Lords of the Stormlands, of Blackwater, many of you know me. You know of my honor and duty to bring justice to the realm, so tell me, why do you sit here in this farce of an army? It is I who lead you in defense of Storm's End against the very same lords that once starved you no break bread with. It was I who lead you to victory against the Greyjoy fleet. The realm is at war, and instead of a trusted commander, you choose a boy green to war. I am not your enemy, I am your king. By law, by right, by honor, by justice, and by word of Stark, those that see true and lay down their arms shall be fully pardoned, and share in the wealth and victory I will bring them when we end the usurpers that lay claim to my throne and killed my brother to get. Our brother, you ask if I'm here to surrender or have war. Neither. I am here to prove to you all that no matter which god, old or new or true, they all know the truth. I am your king. I demand a trial by combat.
Renly and Catelyn, everyone heard his words ring true and honest. Renly's true first test as a king was now present. He had only one true option to move forward. Renly accepted the challenge. Stannis expected him to name Loras or Garland as his champion. Each would be the smart choice if he wanted a good chance of winning. The Tyrells even expected as much. Or perhaps he would even name Brienne of Tarth, being that she just won his tourney and became a member of his Kingsguard. Yet all were in shock, as Renly named himself. It was to be a duel of brothers. Stannis would question his brother, if he was serious, with many of the others also questioning Renly's supposed brash decision. Renly would ignore them all and speak directly to his brother. You looked down upon me long enough. About time I proved to you and Robert that I'm not the sibling child you once knew. Renly would then remove his cloak and draw his sword, with such a determined look even Stannis smirked with approval. To everyone's shock, Renly was the first to lash out. His swordsmanship being surprisingly efficient. Even Stannis was shocked, as he had never seen Renly act as much like a fighter. Loras seemed especially proud, as it was because of him and the two spending much time together that Renly was now effectively wielding his sword. Yet no matter how much Renly had grown, Stannis was just a better warrior, for he had true battle experience. Stannis was able to close the distance between the two, and with a solid punch to the face, he disarmed Renly and pressed the blade against his neck. Renly snarled at him to do it, he expecting nothing less of Stannis. Yet to everyone's true shock, Stannis did not bring Renly the edge of his sword, but instead, with the battle over, simply dropped a peach at his feet. Stannis the victor held out his hand to his brother to take, a gesture that Renly bewilderedly took, Stannis then explained he could not kill his brother, not without killing a part of himself in the process. If he went down that road, who knows where it would take him. Stannis would then tell Renly he was proud of him for fighting for himself and standing up to him. Renly, accepting the outcome and the words extended to him by Stannis, would kneel in front of all. Brienne and Catelyn would then kneel as well, with the rest of the Stormlords doing the same. "Hail, Stannis Baratheon, King of the Seven Kingdoms," Renly declared. With morning arriving, Stannis would meet with his council, where he would learn that the Tyrells and their army had marched back east, leaving the camp. For whom they meant to declare for wasn't certain, but it was clear there was no support from them for Stannis. Still, Stannis was set on marching on King's Landing. He still had the United Stormlands. With an army now some 20,000 strong, it was still enough to take the city. Yet Renly would speak out against it, informing Stannis that they could take King's Landing and most definitely take the city, but the losses would still be too much for them if they wished to hold it from the Tywin's army. Even now, it was too much of a risk if the Tyrells were against them. With them gone, it was clear that they were like the king for Joffrey. They would have Tywin's army in the north to the Riverlands and Mace in the south. They would be trapped if they attacked King's Landing now. Stannis would then question what he should do then, if not take King's Landing. It would be then Catelyn Stark would speak up. She would offer them a chance to ally themselves with her son Robb. He had just won the Battle of Ox Cross and was now heading for Castle Rock to draw out Tywin. Stannis should send their army north and attack Tywin's army in the rear. Baratheon and Stark together once more, just like Ned and Robert. Renly and Davos would agree the opportunity, as currently as the Tyrells were too much of a wild card in the area if they were to attack King's Landing now. Stannis, though, would question why he should help Robb, as he claimed himself king now as well, making him an open rebellion. Renly, though, would argue that while Stannis might be the rightful ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, he's yet to actually take it. Catelyn would then ask what would it take for Stannis to aid them in their fight. Stannis would think hard on the question, and after a pause, would give his answer. He would aid Robb Stark only if a set of conditions were met. Robb was to agree that his heir, be it his firstborn son, born from his pact with the Freys, or his apparent heir, and either Bran or Rickon, shall be betrothed to the Princess Shireen. They should then become king consort to the princess when she takes the throne from him. Their marriage pact would also unite their houses as one. As for Sansa, she would be betrothed to Renly. The North may keep their independence for now, as a defensive and marriage pact would unite the two kingdoms, essentially making them one in practice. Catelyn eagerly accepted the terms, saying Robb would as well. Stannis would also send Renly to join on her mission back to Robb. That night, Stannis would meet with Melisandre. The two would then consummate. Upon having his victory, Stannis would ask that she use her power to rid him of his enemies. She would then promise him that soon his enemies would face his justice at the edge of his sword, for what she had seen in their flames, their greatest mistake. Renly and Stannis' wife, Selyse, would accompany Catelyn back north to the Twins, where Robb would be given Stannis' terms. At first he would reject the terms, upon learning of the Greyjoys attacking Winterfell, and the bulk of his source being crushed out at Duskendale. Robb would do little but accept the terms offered to him by Stannis. He would then inform Renly of his army marching back north to take Winterfell back from the Greyjoys, and his pact with the Freys. There was much to celebrate. Robb's new wife was expecting, the Frey alliance was holding with the marriage between Edmure and Rosalind, and now they had a new ally in the south with Stannis, who marched north to meet them. Yet not all would be merry that night. In fact, a dark and twisted fate would befall Robb's army and family. The Red Wedding, it would be called. Roose Bolton and his army, along with the Freys, would kill the bulk of Robb's and much of the Riverlords during the wedding ceremony in a blasphemous act. Some northern lords like Great John Umber would be captured. Others, like the Blackfish, would escape, but many, such as Robb, Catelyn, Selyse, and Robb's wife, Talisa, would be butchered. When news would reach Stannis, he closed himself off in his tent. For 3 days there was no word or command from their king. Even Melisandre was not welcomed into his tent. Finally, a raven would arrive from Dragonstone for Stannis from his daughter. Stannis would finally exit his tent and read the letter. His silence an echo, yet a single sentence would be spoken by their king. We go north. The castle of Rook's Rest burned as Stannis' army marched onward, having claimed victory in their battle. Hoisted up on a cross, the Tyrell commander, Randyll Tarly, the one who smashed Robb's forces at Duskendale, burned with the castle. Tywin's army stayed at Harrenhal, expecting a siege, yet it never came. Instead, word would reach Tywin that Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, and his warband had been ambushed near Maidenpool. It was said the Blackfish, with some 200 men, along with the so-called Brotherhood, had ambushed the Mountain on the road. They then delivered the Mountain to Stannis, who in turn imprisoned and then sent the Mountain south as a gift to Dorne. It was learned that Jaime Lannister, having escaped captivity during the Red Wedding, was captured by the same Brotherhood as well. Tywin was delivered both of Jaime's hands, with a message that read, "The North remembers, and ours is fury." Lastly, to Cersei in King's Landing, a locket of Princess Myrcella's with the Red Viper would be sent. Tyrion, fearing for the safety of the rest of his family, force-marched his army back to King's Landing. Yet still, Stannis didn't attack the city. Instead, his army, using the river and Ser Davos, continued up north. There, he brought his army to the newly besieged Riverrun, where Stannis and his army crushed the Freys and sent them back to the Twins. It was now becoming clear to Tywin that Stannis was on the march for vengeance, and he meant to exact justice on all those involved with the wedding and the death of his wife and brother. And this time, Davos would be named Hand of the King, and Melisandre would be named his queen. Walder Frey would send word to the Boltons for aid that Stannis' army now camped just south of the Twins at Seaguard, prepared to lay siege. Yet once more the siege would not yet come. Word had been sent across the Seven Kingdoms of a great wildling army marching on the wall. Seeing a chance to bolster his army and win favor with the North, Stannis sailed for the wall. Leaving the Blackfish with the bulk of the army, Stannis, with Ser Davos, Melisandre, and Ser Beric Dondarrion, would go north. Along the way, meeting Gendry, who Stannis saw his brothers in. Already having won multiple victories, and his army still strong, Stannis, not seeing the need to use Gendry as a sacrifice, would name him a legal Baratheon and his squire. Stannis and an army of cavalry would smash the wildlings, routing them. He would then offer those that bent the knee to him a chance to live south of the wall. Clan Giantsbane, led by Tormund, would accept this proposal, adding some few thousand wildlings to Stannis' northern army. Over the coming 2 weeks, Houses Glover, Manderly, Cerwyn, Mormont, and Umber would pledge loyalty to Stannis, amassing their army at Last Hearth to join his. Stannis, in the meantime, would meet with Jon Snow. At this time, Stannis would show Jon a letter from Robb. It was a royal decree naming Jon his heir, to which Stannis told Jon of his pact with Robb. Stannis would then tell Jon that he's releasing Jon from his oath as a member of the Night's Watch and naming him Lord of Winterfell. Jon would protest, but Stannis would grab Jon and press him against the wall, telling him that the Lannisters killed his father, the Greyjoys killed his brothers, the Boltons his brother and mother and unborn nephew, his sister is a prisoner, his war with the wildlings over, now his duty was to the realms of men. How can he protect the realm if he can't protect his own family? Hell, his new family of brothers whisper and plot for his very death. No more. Stannis would have none of it. If he wants to do his duty, then he has to grab his sword and march south with him, and the Greyjoys and the Boltons. Bring justice to the Lannisters and Tyrells. To save the realms of men, there needs to be a bloody realm in the first place to save. His place was not at the wall. His watch had ended, now to be a Stark the world needs. Jon felt Stannis' words pierce his heart. He knew he was right. Adding Jon to his cause, Stannis' second army, his northern army, marched south to Winterfell. They would face their ultimate trial on the road, as near Whitehall on the frozen lake they would face Roose Bolton's army. Some 4,000 Bolton men and Stannis' northern alliance of 5,000 would clash, It'd be named the Battle of Ice after that day. The two armies would clash in 3 sections, with 2 of them being across the ice. Eventually, after nearly an hour of fighting, the ice would begin to break and crack. The breaking of the frozen lake and the chaos of the battle lines forced the Bolton army to rout and flee south. Jon Snow, with Beric and Tormund, would give chase with some 1,000 men and catch Roos's personal retinue just outside of Winterfell. Here they would clash with Ramsay Snow and the last 2,000 Bolton cavalry reinforcing the battle. Jon Snow versus Ramsay Bolton, the Battle of Bastards. Luckily for Jon, Stannis had been able to rally the remaining bulk of his army and arrived from the north end and joined in the battle. Nearly 9,000 died that day, as 2 battles were fought in close succession. However, thanks to both Jon and Stannis being present in the end, the Northern Coalition would be victorious. With Jon being named the new Warden of the North, he would be betrothed to Princess Shireen. With the Northern Alliance marching south, and the Stormland and Riverlands army marching north on the Twins, the Freys were left with no choice but to surrender. Yet this would not spare them Stannis' wrath. Walder Frey and all the sons of House Frey, over the age of 5, were put to the sword. As for the women, they married off to lesser lords and nobles. Edmure was then released and placed as the new lord of the Twins. Stannis would then be brought a wave of great news, as Balon Greyjoy was killed by his brother Euron. Tywin was killed by his son Tyrion, and same for Joffrey, who was poisoned at his own wedding with Margaery. The Mountain was put to death by Oberyn Martell the Red Viper. Dorne now warred with the Reach in the south. The Greyjoys in the Iron Islands were now in civil war. The Lannisters had lost each of their heads, leaving only Cersei and young Tommen ruling. The wildling threat was over, and the North, Stormlands, and Riverlands were now united under a single banner of Stannis Baratheon. Melisandre would then suggest that the Lord of Light will always provide to those that ask for his help. Stannis' foes made the mistake of unleashing Stannis' true drive and determination to see their demise. Now all that was left was to take King's Landing. Yet one final message would arrive for Stannis and the Twins. Daenerys Targaryen had arrived to Westeros and claimed Dragonstone for her own. With her, an army of Unsullied, a horde of Dothraki, an Ironborn fleet, and 3 fully grown dragons. And that is going to end today's story. So, surprise, I know I didn't mention this video coming up in any of my updates. It was kind of a spur of the moment video idea I had of Stannis choosing not to kill Renly. How much would that affect or change anything? And both in the books and shows, seeing Stannis' regret of killing Renly, I think that is kind of like the first major step that sends him on the path of, potentially sacrificing members of his family and whatnot. And so I think if he chose not to do so, he would very much be, the Manus throughout this. Because Renly was extremely smart, at least in the books, because he planned on letting, members of the 5 armies and 5 kings, kill themselves out before he marched on King's Landing. And I think with Renly at his side, Stannis would be more open and swayed to joining, up with Robb and everything. And so I feel like that's what would happen. However, I do think there was so much outside of his control that the Red Wedding would still happen. Only now, Renly, who would be a part of this pact, would also be killed. And I think that would drive Stannis, to have members of his family murdered by, Bolton Freys, for him to put a pause on King's Landing and just march north, sail up north, either through the rivers or through the coast, and just begin enacting justice on Boltons and Freys alike. And I think him doing that would still lead him and put him in a very powerful position to help the Night's Watch and the Northern Lords as well. And I also like the idea of Stannis being the one to point out to Jon that he needs to march south, it doesn't take murder of Jon to get him to march south. But yeah, this was just a fun story I cooked up within a matter of just a couple days, and I really like how it turned out. I hope you guys did too. But yeah, this has been the Galaxy's Cantina, and I am your host, JD, signing off. May the Force be with you, always.